with the weather. What about there?
Yeah, it's almost like that, 27 degrees,
Oh, great.
sometimes 30. So
Where are you from?
I'm from Mexico.
Oh, great, great.
Yeah, where in Brazil are you at?
I'm in São Paulo.
Sao Paulo,
Yeah,
nice.
yeah.
Okay, so the weather is nice in general over there.
Yeah, there are a lot of clouds and rain, but
Okay,
I have another house about 100 kilometers from here. There is more
okay,
sunnier place. It's always sun and beautiful days. I like most.
nice, perfect. Okay, so thanks for taking the call. Let me tell you a bit about the project and what we're looking for, and then we'll have a conversation about your experience, the technologies that you've used, and yeah, at the end, if you have any questions, just let me know.
Okay.
The structure of the conversation is like, yeah, as I mentioned, you will tell me a bit of your experience, the stack that you've used. Maybe I'll ask a bit more if I want to dig in on some of the technologies you've used or how you implemented them. And also we'll have a few theory kind of concepts that I'd like to know about the systems engineering, just to know like how you're feeling about that, what's your knowledge on that. And yeah, that's more or less the structure of the conversation. Okay, I might
Okay.
interrupt you a bit in some of the when you tell me a bit of your experience, but it wouldn't be much. But just if I want to dig in a bit more about the technologies. Okay,
Okay, sounds good.
perfect. Thank you, Cristiano. So we are working at Dick's Sporting Goods, which is a store in the United States, which is one of the biggest ones, if not the biggest. And the technology department that they have handles obviously all of their inventories, the online sales, loyalty, marketing, and different aspects of the technology. So they're looking for developers and who have experience using Java. And also, if they have Kafka, that's also a plus. If they know if they have used Kafka, that's also a very good thing to have. And obviously, the client is in the United States, so everything, all the communication will be done in English. And the team, the way we're working with them is staff augmentation. So that means that we will be working directly with their teams, like working on tickets and having conversations on how to solve a particular implementation and different things. So it's a very nice environment in that sense, and they also like a lot of pair programming.
I
So that's
see.
also good. So you can have a chance to learn a bit more about the domain and the different teams and how they work, and also if you have if they use any particular technology that not one else uses, they can tell you a bit more about that when you have like pair programming. So that's a good approach of working that they have.
Okay, for sure. It's
Okay.
good to
Okay.
learn with paired programming.
Okay. So far, any questions that you might have?
No, so far so good. You mentioned Java and Kafka.
Java and
Which
Kafka, yeah, mainly.
other technology? I suppose they use
Yeah,
Spring and everything else.
yeah, they use Spring. And they also have they're using C Sharp in some of the projects, some of the services. Not much. They're using also Kotlin. There's something
Okay.
that's another language that they're trying to implement more, and React Native. That's a switch that we're doing, moving more towards React Native. And some of the applications they have, they're done on Android, but they want to switch to React Native. So those are the other technologies. The thing for this position in particular is kind of the Java and Kotlin. You might do some UI if given the chance, and if you're
For sure.
open, there might be some opportunities to work on that. Okay,
That's good. I have
and
some experience with front end too, React, Angular, and other
okay,
technologies.
awesome. That's perfect. That's perfect. So which kind of UI is you, Angular or React or?
I use it Angular, React, old Java interfaces like JSF, Strut, and everything else. I did some native applications both for Android and less, but some for iPhones too. So, but always that case, the system is already there running. Then I just put new functionalities on it, a new field or a new screen, following the same pattern that was on the system before.
Awesome, awesome, perfect. So let's jump into it. Can you tell me a bit of the experience that you have,
Okay.
and what stack you've used and how you used it?
Okay. Well, most of the time I worked with Java, and particularly on the last years using Spring Boot and Spring Data and Spring REST to build microservices on this Java world. I had some experience using C Sharp too, but very little, about 6 months, but a long time ago. Uh, on the last year, I did some studies using C Sharp too, but not nothing very deep. But I could realize that the things are looks almost the same as we have in Java. And you mentioned it, Kafka. I used both Kafka, RabbitMQ as QA services in the past, but always using like I have a class that puts some information on the QA, and I have another which reads from the QA. Sometimes I had to restart the cluster of those queues too, but most of my work was on the development side and not this part more like a DevOps position. So talking about the front ends, as I mentioned it before, sometimes as a back-end developer or even in a full stack position, I always have to do some small things on the front end. Nothing very comprehensive, but small things that I can do. So I guess that's a very very brief of
Okay, no,
what I have
that's
been
that's
working.
that's perfect. Now, using Java, you mentioned you use Spring Boot. Did you use databases, and what kind of databases did you use in that case?
Yes, I use it both relational database using Spring Data to do that, and for non-relational database, I use it MongoDB and Pivotal Genfire, which is like a MongoDB one. So I use it both of the scenarios.
Okay, okay, nice. And how did you use those systems? Were they microservices? They were monolithics? What kind of services were they?
Okay, I have experience on both scenarios. The monolith we use it more in old applications, like when we have a JSF application, for instance. But I have seen some monolithics running on Spring Boot. So we had a lot of services on the same container. That was something I saw too. And of course, the microservices, the most common thing on the last years. So we have a Spring Boot application for, uh, usually we have one for each domain, because I know that you could break up the microservices by operations. It would be something very small, but most of the time I have a microservice for each domain on the projects I
Oh,
work at.
awesome. So, talking about domains, have you used or have you heard of domain driven? Uh,
I worked on a project that has domain driven, but I didn't dig it into details. No, I just got the code and followed it the same way it was writing there. The
in
same
there. Okay.
for hexagonal architecture. So we have
Okay.
the ports and mappers and those structures. But most of the time I use the MVC pattern. So I
Then
have just the separation between the definition of the service and the business logic and the domain layer.
And when you work with hexagonal architecture, what can you tell me? What did you like it? How was it? Like, what did you learn from it?
It was good in one side because we could have those ports and mappers, so to translate from a domain object to a DTO, for instance, it was very straightforward. But for some operations on this particular project, we had that text structure in Java which you cannot modify, so you don't have getters and setters. It's a immutable, object, and that was really bad in some scenarios because I just need a get and I could do that, so I had to write a lot of code to solve something that could be simpler. I forgot the name of the thing in Java we use it to do that, but it's something from Java 17. You have the objects when you don't have gets and set. They are immutable. Totally forgot the name.
Lombok? Is it the framework Lombok or?
No, it was something from Java that instead of having a traditional object with, attributes and methods, you only had the declaration of fields, and you could not modify. They were all final. I totally forgot that thing, but it
Yeah,
was
yeah,
something
like,
particular
okay.
to
Like
this.
immutable objects were they like they just
Yeah.
you could just create them and that's it. You couldn't do anything more to them.
Yeah. That was the situation. You mentioned it, Kotlin. I used it for about 6 months to build microservices on a company I worked at. It was good. I didn't use it much, but it was a good experience.
Nice. Yeah, Kotlin is quite similar to Java in that sense. It's focused a bit more precisely on kind of immutable objects. Like it's very strict in that sense. I mean, you can access the properties of a particular object, but the goal is to make them immutable. Once you create them, you just let them be. And yeah, and towards functional programming is kind of the main kind of focus of Kotlin. And moving into that functional programming, have you used that in Java, and how have you used it in your projects?
No, in Java, not. I don't think I have used it. Functional programming, but on the last project I was at Disney, we used Scala, and everything was functional there. So the structures, the headers, and all those things were there.
Nice. And for example, in Java, did you use? I'm assuming you use collections, like the different types of collections that exist in Java.
Yes, most of the time lists and maps, they are enough to solve the problems, but I have the knowledge about sets and we should list, set, maps. Those are the basic ones I use it.
That's right. Yeah, the abstracts. And streams. Did you have a chance to use streams?
Yes, most of the time to filter a collection or even to order it by a particular field, or even comparing some properties and doing some transformation using that map, sometimes to convert an entity for a DTO, for instance. So
nice. Yeah, that's usually the way. And do you know the three kind of steps that exist in collections?
Yes, we have the list. Then, for instance, we have the list dot string. Then we can do a map. That's not the first step. Definitely, the first step is to filter. We could filter like a SQL query you do to the database. Then you have the order, where you can specify the order you want the objects, and at the last step is the map, where you can do conversions.
Okay, yeah, and also when you collect, once you have the conversion, for example, of a DTO that you mentioned, like you do the map, you do the stream, then you do the map, you convert that particular object to a DTO, and then you have the collect, where you can get another list of that particular object that you just created in the map. So there's kind of the three steps. But yeah, very good. So you've used them, and using streams, it requires a bit of functional programming there, like when you have to go through the different elements in a list or a collection, then and doing the transformations. Yeah, very nice. And in Spring Boot, did you have a chance to create a service from scratch or a project from scratch using Spring Boot?
Just for students, I guess. I don't remember creating anything from scratch. On one company I worked, I was creating a microservice, but there was already like a startup project. I just clone it on my machine, then rename things and start from there. But on studies, I did that to create that basic class where we put the annotations and everything else.
Yeah. And for example, in Spring Boot, if you use, you can use the website or some IDE. You have the initializer where you specify and then you just define dependencies or the things that you want your service to do, and then use it. And talking about the annotations, what annotations have you used in Spring Boot?
Okay. On the startup class of the Spring Boot, which is the configuration, we have the annotation of application, I guess, to define that that class is the starting point of the project. And from Spring Boot, I know that we import the libraries on the POM of if you are using Maven. Then we put the application, and that's our remember. I don't remember if we have other annotations there because always get this done. I don't have to configure, so I just remember we have that add application annotation.
Okay. And for example, in some of the services that you've created or you've used, did you have to create REST APIs?
Oh yes, yes. Then from Spring REST, I guess is the framework. Then we have the annotation of REST controller to define a controller. We have the get and post mapping to use the verbs from the TTP. And from Spring REST, I guess those are the main annotations: the REST controller and then the get mapping or whatever.
And what other verbs do you remember from the REST APIs?
Okay, get, post, delete, put. We have path too, but path is something I don't use much. But those are the five main ones.
Okay, nice. And you use annotations such as service and component
Yes.
and repository?
I use that the service and component. I know there are some difference between them, but they are only semantical because they are almost the same. And you use the service when you are defining a business layer usually. So you have the REST controller for the REST implementation. Then you have the annotation service for the business logic, and you have the repository to make the access to the database. So then we have the auto-wired. For instance, you have a REST controller that uses a service. You annotate the service with service, and then when you use it on the REST controller, you annotate that with auto-wired. So Spring can inject that service there.
That's correct. Yeah, that's right. And did you use JPA in Spring? Did you have a chance to use JPA?
JPA in Spring. I guess I used it some time ago, but I used to use JPA with monolithic applications, not Spring. Both JPA and Hibernate on older applications, but with Spring, I don't really remember. Most of the time, I'm using Spring Data to do that. Part of
Okay.
mapping.
Awesome. And okay, in Kafka, how did you use Kafka? In which projects did you have to use Kafka?
Okay. Well, we had a project that sent email and notifications for the user. One good use case, very simple to explain, is when you are creating a new user on the system, then you have to send an email to confirm that registration. So the process of creating a user goes online, then you put an information on Kafka, so the queue can wait a little to be consumed by a consumer and then send the email. We did that to avoid having the process of creating a user freezed waiting for the email sending. So we made this part asynchronous. But I had other user cases too, but this is the easiest one to explain.
Nice. And in you also use RabbitMQ, is that correct?
Yes, I use it both Kafka and RabbitMQ, and sometimes WebSphere queues too.
Okay.
And sometimes Amazon SQS, but from my developer point of view, it's almost the same concept. I have a part that writes to the queue and another part of code that reads from the queue.
Okay. And do you know a bit more about Kafka, how it works internally? And
No, I just know that we have the topics that are like a queue for Kafka, but I don't know many details about Kafka yet.
Okay, nice. All right, and let's jump into some concepts. that we usually ask, and because also the client asks. Do you know the solid principles?
Yes, they are about having a good code structure, so you can write clean code. And I, I know that each letter is one principle, and I need to remember. I know that the L is about the list of substitution, where you have a parent class, then you can replace it with a child class, but you cannot replace a child class always with a parent class. And we do have the the first letter of it is single responsibility, where you have classes that have only one responsibility. And about the I really need to know exactly what which letter stands to, but in general there are principles to write a good code where it's easy to maintain.
Okay. Uh, and do you know what are the principles of object-oriented programming? Like, what are the key characteristics of object-oriented programming?
Okay, we do have a class that is like a header on a table, so you have the attributes of that class and you have the methods, which are actions. So each class represents something from the real world or from the business logic. For instance, you can have a window class, which the attribute is closed, so it's closed or open, and a method that can open or close a window. Then you have inheritance, so you can have a master window class. You can have those windows that opens like this or opens like this as child to that window. And you, so we have the objects are like lines of a class in the meaning if you have a table, the class is the definition of those structure, and then each object is one instance of the class. So you can have a silver window, a wood window, you can have multiple instances of windows. So you do have the interface too that defines the behavior that's possible for an object. So you could have an interface that has a method open, and then you can have that both for windows or doors, both of them you can open. I guess those are the main concepts of programming language. Because I
Yep.
always worked with that, but I studied a long time ago in the college, so I
Yeah,
don't remember this
no
exactly.
problem. And design patterns, have you used any types of design patterns?
Oh yes, I think the most common one is the MVC, as I talked before. We do have singleton too, which is used behind the scenes by Spring. So you only have one instance of an object of that class. We have the factor too as a design pattern. So you can, instead of creating an object using a new, you have those classes that are factories which builds the objects for you. It's like what we have on Bean annotation on Spring. It's something is a good example of that. We do have the facade delegate too, where you can decouple the layers of your application. So it's something similar of what we have today with front ends and back ends. They are the couple, but you do that internally on the project. I guess those are the main examples I remember now, but I know there are a huge list of design patterns, and one good thing to know about design patterns is that one design pattern is not always good or always bad. They are good for a situation, bad for another one.
That's right. And you mentioned the singleton pattern. Uh, and in Spring, as you well mentioned, it's used quite frequently there. Now, what if you wanted to, instead of have one instance of a particular object in Spring, you might want to get like a new instance every time you request it. Do you know how you would do that in Spring?
I know I didn't do that on real world, but I know there is a concept of like a scope of an object that you can define it So it could be a session, like from the start of the application to the end, you have the same instance, or you can have something on a lower life cycle of that. So, but I didn't know how to do that exactly. It's something I need to
Yeah.
do a research.
Yeah, that's the prototype. That's an annotation that you can have. So you have the singleton, which is kind of the default behavior in Spring, and you have the prototype also that you can use for that. Okay, okay, perfect. So you have a bit of knowledge about the hexagonal architecture. That's good. Kafka is just you used it just a bit, right? Like you didn't have to know much about how it worked.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, that's good. Perfect. I think those are the questions that I have. I don't know if you have any questions for me.
Okay, if you could talk a little bit more about this specific position, that would be good. You mentioned the technologies, but other details about it.
Yeah, in this particular, let me see this particular position, Martech. Yeah, so
It's for Dixie,
this
right?
Dick's Sporting Goods. That's the name of the client. As I mentioned, it's probably the biggest sporting store in the United States. It's like we use agile methodologies to manage the project. They have 2 week sprints, and yeah, it's the environment for working is very nice. Like people are usually very open. They share all their knowledge, and they're very into implementing new things and making these in a way like helping their customers get their products, and yeah, in general the environment is very nice. Like there, as I mentioned, there's it's a staff augmentation, so you have direct contact with the clients, and then they will give you the tasks to do, and then you will have access to the dashboard. It's Jira, the technology that we use is Jira, so you have access to all of the tickets there, and then just work on whatever you have, and you compare with someone else to work on a particular ticket if it's too complicated. But yeah, that's usually how it works.
Okay, okay, great. And do you have some specific starting date for this project?
No, if everything goes well, the next step would be to introduce you to the client, and they will interview you. Also, they will have similar questions to the ones I have. So you will have an interview with them, and yeah, and if they're okay with it, then they will let you know when you would start.
Okay, good. I asked that because on Glow I saw that some positions has a specific starting date, so that was
Yeah.
why I asked it. Okay, good. That was
Okay.
all from my side.
Awesome. Okay, Cristiano, thank you very much for your time. And yeah, I'll provide the feedback, and thank you very much.
Thank you too. Nice to meet you. Have a good one.
Nice to meet you too.
Bye.
Bye.